Hi, this is Carrie Brownstein.
This is DJ Premier.
This is Darren Aronofsky.
You got the RZA right here.
Rose McGowan.
Radiohead.
Aisha Tyler.
Tribe Called Quest. Fred Armisen.
Prince Paul.
Javier Munoz. Seth Meyers.
Frankie Cosmos.
Flying Lotus.
Hi, we're Chaim, and you're listening to the Talkhouse Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Talkhouse Podcast. I'm Josh Modell. On this week's episode, we've got a pair of fantastic songwriters in a sweet conversation about craft and life in general. Sima Cunningham and Roberto Lange. Now, Lange has been making fascinating, lovely music under the name Helado Negro since 2009, mixing breezy indie rock with electronic sounds, frequently with more than a passing nod to his Ecuadorian roots. His sonic world is always inviting, even as it's sort of otherworldly, and he often matches those sounds with cool visuals, which is no wonder considering his background in computer art. Earlier this year, Lange released the 8th Helado Negro album. It's called Phasor, and it's among his best, mixing tranquil sounds with his searching spirit. You might be lulled and puzzled at the same time, which is a great feeling. Check out a little bit of the song Coloros del Mar right here. The other half of today's conversation, Sima Cunningham, is best known as half of the core of the Chicago band Finom, who are originally known as Ohm. Now, Finom released its Not God album earlier this year, and it's full of unexpected pop turns tied together by the harmony between Cunningham and her longtime musical partner, Macy Stewart. But the occasion for today's conversation is actually Cunningham's second solo album, just out on Ruination Records. It's called High Roller and explores a more personal side to her songwriting. For example, there's a great song written for Cunningham's brother Liam Kazar, himself a musician and one-time Talkhouse Podcast guest as well. Check out a little bit of that song, For Liam, right here.
But I would die for you. I'd take a bullet and I'd give one too. I've thought about it since the day when you came into my life.
Now, in addition to that song, which Lange points out as a favorite on High Roller, these two chat about Cunningham's adventures in Ireland, what it's like to create an onstage persona and interact with your audience, and how Cunningham's new album was a 10-year journey that was worth the wait. Enjoy.
Hi, Roberto. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. I'm always happy to be talking to you.
I know. It's really a treat. I'm grateful to you for doing this. Where are you in the world right now?
I'm in Asheville. I just got back. I was in Victoria for the first time, Victoria, BC. Never seen it. Had never experienced it.
Wow.
And have you been there?
No, never. We were supposed to, and then I think it was a 2020 festival or something.
It had a profound effect on me. I didn't expect it to be so beautiful, to be honest.
Yeah.
And so pleasant.
Is it
I don't know.
big plains, big mountains? What kind of geological phenomenon are we talking about?
It's like on the water. You know, people were pleasant. The views were pleasant. There were some mountains. There's a lot going on there that I don't really fully understand yet. But I was like, okay, I would come back here. It was a good show. That's always a plus. And yeah, I was there in Vancouver and then Seattle, and now I'm back home in Asheville.
Yeah, we played there like a year or so ago, and it was beautiful. I'm in Ireland right now. I'm on the west coast of Ireland with my family.
Whoa, amazing.
Yeah, we're like really in the middle of nowhere in Connemara, which is like way out on the west coast past Galway, kind of where like the Inisherin sort of zone was set, if you saw that movie. We've been really doing a lot of Martin McDonagh revisits on this trip. We just watched In Bruges again last night. My dad's side of the family is all Irish, and we've never done like a big family trip out here, and it's been really, really cool. We went to a pub the other night, and there was like a session going on, people playing traditional Irish music, and my dad sat in on a bunch of songs, and then I sort of coyly pulled out my tin whistle and went and played a couple tunes as well.
How good does it feel to do that? I don't know. I don't, that's not something that I do. So it must feel so good to just be able to do that.
I was being really shy about it, but my brother sort of gave me the eyes of, go get your butt up there. So I went and kind of I kind of lingered on the edge of the circle. The tin whistle, I really love playing it, but it's like really shrill, and you want to make sure that you're not like suddenly like killing the whole vibe in the room. But it was really, really fun. And everyone was very sweet and kind. And I actually got invited into the circle to sit down for a couple tunes. So,
wow.
Yeah.
That sounds rad. I love that. I guess I didn't fully realize that your whole family was that musical. Like everybody, you had talked to me about your dad being a musician, but so your brother is as well.
He's a musician as well, Liam Kazar. And yeah, he plays in a bunch of bands. But yeah, he's a really great songwriter and a singer. And yeah, we grew up with my dad, who is a songwriter, and my mom, who is a painter, but also has like a deep, I would say, like punk streak in her. Like she started like a band once and she was like, I'm going to be the bass player. She's got a lot of gusto. We always say she's the most punk rock in the whole family. We're all sitting over here trying to like tell earnest stories through the craft of songwriting. And she's just kind of like, will get up on stage and grab the microphone and like yell and jump around. She was like at art school in the 80s in Chicago and like saw a lot of like kind of early like freako post-punk art school bands come out of that. A lot of the bands that like hung out around like the Rainbow Club and the artists in Chicago. I don't know. I feel like she was like seeing some of that and kind of absorbing it as, you know, as like part performance art, part music making.
I feel like so much is like documented in a really public and world sense about like that scene in New York specifically. But it would be cool to know, to see it in a really like cohesive way, to understand it more about like what happened in Chicago those years that you're talking about. You know, that's exciting to me.
Yeah, I mean, I know it was there, and I feel like I sort of like live now in like the eras that like are directly attributed to it. But I also like, it also is still a little bit of a mystery to me. Like I feel like that's kind of one of the interesting things about like living in cities or even living in Chicago. Like I grew up here and I was like immersed in one scene, and then I left and I came back and I like was connected to, but there's still so many parts of a scene that I'm not aware of or I'm not connected to. And I think that's kind of okay. Like sometimes it's really fun to like know all the nooks and crannies of who's doing what. And then sometimes I think it's okay to be totally tuned out of it and kind of just following your own path to what you're making. Like, I don't know. Do you feel like when you started making records that you were making it in direct response to anyone or anything that was like around you? Or do you feel like it was something where you were like, I'm just going to explore this avenue and I have no idea what's walking me down that road?
Yeah. Well, funny we should be talking about this. There's a lot of electronic music that was happening in Miami at the time when I was like starting to get into like thinking about music as like a way to rebel or kind of like get away from things that I heard on the radio. I wanted that for whatever reason. I don't know. You know, it wasn't like my parents were rebellious or musical in any sense. You know, they were just working class folks. Just my dad's a machinist. My mom was a secretary and you know, took care of us. So when I was like looking for things, I didn't have like some kind of anchor for anything outside of the normal. I guess the outside of the normal being that like the stuff that was happening in my house was way different than stuff that I was experiencing through people in school. You know, like my parents were from South America, from Ecuador, and you know, like the music and the parties that we would have at our house were like way different than like, you know, I would go to like somebody who's white essentially from the States and you know, it was just way different vibe. I think when I got into college, specifically like thinking about music and listening to music, like right before that, I remember getting into like, I don't know, like 99 or something like that, getting into like Chicago labels specifically. And that was like the big seed for me to kind of like think about music and community. Like I was like very into Thrill Jockey and very into Drag City, and I was like buying like, literally everything I could very early on when I was like my late teens, early 20s. And so that's why I guess I was asking those specific questions about Chicago, because I was like, oh, cool, like more things to know about the things that were like bedrock for me in terms of wanting to make music and wanting to get into more of that family of sound.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I always love about music actually is kind of late discovery. Like I really love discovering late something that ends up being like a huge musical part of my life. Like I didn't find Kate Bush until like just a couple of years ago, but it was so cool to suddenly have like her whole catalog. And I feel like with Chicago also, even though I grew up in Chicago, there are like whole deep dives I can do of like a scene and how all of these artists like impacted each other and were making records in connection. And, you know, kind of it's cool to like kind of look at a labels and what they put out in a year. Like now I think about like when my friends have like new labels, or like the label that put out my record, like Ruination, and like the whole cohort of artists that they're putting out now all kind of have like interwoven stories in some way, or like have crisscrossed paths. And I like to think about like looking at small labels like that as sort of like being able to like dive into like the history lesson of a scene. I don't know, it does make me kind of like want to go back and do a little
musical excavation.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. No, I feel that. I love that too. Yeah, and you know what's cool? I think I used to really be motivated by like getting compilations that were kind of like these synopses of scenes, you know. I feel like they became very prevalent in the late 90s, early 2000s, where it's just like, you know, this is music from, you know, Africa, or this is music from the Middle East, or this is not the, you know, no offense to anyone, but not like the Putumayo stuff that was like on like, you know, Barnes and Noble.
Sure.
But I mean, like, I think, you know, you could tell it was like stuff that was like a little more like heady and cooler, and like, so I got, you know, I was into that. And then I think as I've gotten older, I think speaking to what I think you're talking about, I really enjoyed discovering music by older artists that are still alive, you know, and kind of like really seeing their trajectory as an artist and being like, and kind of like seeing yourself in that more so than trying to like envision yourself in this like celebrity model, fame model, or like success model of like some like enormous band, and seeing what they, you know what I mean? Like that's the stuff that's like put out there in magazines the most, and you're like, damn, I'm, you know, like that's, if I'm not that, then I'm not a musician, or, you know, and I think it's hard unless like you're in some very like specific niche of like, I'm in like this like new music world, or I'm in this like super like free jazz world, or, you know, and then you feel like you have to like isolate yourself from music in general. And that's, you know, it's obviously, I'm like being really like limiting with, I know that that's not true, but I think when you're younger, it's harder to know like when like what's really true. So it's been really fun to kind of like excavate and then like learn about these musicians who are still alive, and then kind of see where they're at in their life, and seeing like, you're like, what have you been up to? And then like you look, you're like, okay, you put out like 15 CDs in the past like 20 years.
It's funny that you say that, because I've been thinking a lot about longevity and like how people's careers evolve through their life, and also like different ways to approach making music for your whole life. It was interesting, like getting my solo record out, but also my Finom record out this year is such an enormous like relief for me. I feel like so excited and proud to like play both of them and just be able to share them with the world. But I also am feeling this like this feeling now of like freedom, of I just want to like kind of make records and make music and release it, and not really have to like free myself kind of from like the record cycle thing. And also like looking towards other older artists who maybe have been out of that for a while too, and just kind of enjoying, I don't know, I'm just wanting to study more how people have done this over the span of decades, and not just how people have done it crunched into like the years of their early 20s or something like that.
I think there's room for a lot of people to recognize that. And I feel like maybe some people are starting to write about artists who've been working for a long time, and like looking at them now as an artist who's matured through a lot of different stages of their career, but not in this like retrospective part where it's just like rewriting a narrative, but just kind of like looking at them and being like, oh no, this person's working now. I feel like that's like when you hear about somebody, you're like, oh yeah, this is like retrospective of somebody, and then they're like, they're 81. And you're like, oh shit, where have they been these past 40 years? And they're like, well, they've been working, you know?
Yeah.
But it's just like, just the way this works is like no one really talks about what's happening. And I was going to point to it's hard for me to keep up on it, but I know that website Tone Glow does a really good job of kind of like looking and interviewing people who are just like working and artists who are doing a lot in different spheres. And I've always respected that, you know. I think it's like, it's always cool. I think I'm there right now. I'm 44, so I don't know what's going to happen for the next 40 years.
I mean, I love your record so much, Roberto, and I'm inspired by all like the different ways that you've worked as an artist, but also like grown and like used your stage performance to, you know, be able to like evolve like what the performance is, not only what the music is, like the recording, but also what you bring to the stage. When I saw you last just a couple months ago at Talia, like kind of seeing you just sing so directly, but also kind of dance with the audience in this really special way. It just reminded me that it's so nice to find like new ways to like kind of like have a love affair with your audience and bring them on stage with you.
That's really sweet of you to say. I like sharing on stage, and it's been an evolution to understand what that means for me, because I think about somebody like you, and I haven't congratulated you on High Roller, which is dope. And I know I've listened to it before. You sent it to me a while ago, but it's always more amazing to hear it in its final form presented to everybody. There's like definitely 6 songs that I could talk about as like amazing works. So we can,
thank you.
Especially that one. Now I understand. I was going to ask you who For Liam was, but now I get it. So
yeah, it's my brother.
Yeah. I thought it was so sweet. Now
the album, This Is How to Smile, that's a lot about brotherly. There's some brother feelings on there, right? Like about your brother?
Yeah. Well, he's on the cover for sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's like family stuff in there for sure, but For Liam is a special song, Sima.
Oh, thank you.
It's very sweet. It's very, very sweet and very amazing. But yeah, I guess what I was going to say was kind of like touching on that is like, I, didn't go to music school or don't have any kind of like formal training in any like instrument or music in general, kind of just did music as I learned it and as I saw it. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the people I was surrounded by were DJs and producers. And so the people that I would kind of like be around were people who were like MCs who were on stage just working like that, like with a DJ. And that's how I kind of like learned how to connect with an audience and understand it and evolve on my own, like being on stage by myself always, and not really ever having the support of a band. But as someone who loves music and as an audience member, whether a music nerd or not, like it's really important for me, or when I'm seeing somebody live and understanding this is like, I just want to see that person do that song that I love live, And it's that basic. And I know it sounds like so simple, but it's like really just like, I don't care how they do it.
Yeah.
Like when they do it live, I'm just like, cool, this is amazing. Whether they have a band or they're by themselves, like I'm not like one is better than the other. And I've thought about that a lot for myself too. I'm just like, you have this like understanding of the people in front of you that are enjoying the music in that live setting. And you're like, cool. Yeah. Like they want to experience it as you would want to experience it. So you got to just give that and that's it,
Yeah. I'm very excited to play like a lot of these songs live. I do just hope that these songs like live as like songs in people's head. I like to tell the stories around them, and there's sort of like a more intimate way that I like to perform the songs from this record that is like more conversational with the audience. Whereas like with Finom, I think a lot of the electricity from the performance is in like me and Macy connecting with each other and the other performers on stage and kind of like holding energy between us. But with my solo songs, I feel like it's so like I just always want to hold energy between like me and the audience and make sure like exactly what it is saying and coming out of my mouth can like go into each person and then make them feel however they interpret it. I like having like different like hats I can put on. Like I don't know if do you ever like dream about making a completely new different persona to get out on stage with?
I saw Finom in Big Ears this year, and it was exactly what you said. It's like you and Macy, like kind of just like if there was another alt source of energy for the world, it would be you two. I feel like you kind of you generate like this like really intense and palpable electricity that's like that really is infectious as you're both doing it. And there's like a huge amount of it that's like your kind of your virtuosity, both of you, but it's like there's a playfulness that's what connects, I think, the most of people. You know what I mean? People who watch people play instruments, who don't know how to play instruments, don't really like, they don't know what's going on. They're like, cool. You know, they're not like judging. They don't care what you're doing. You know what I mean? Like if you're like, this is the most complex chords ever, you know, like no one cares. But the playfulness that you're having fun, that's like, I feel like that's the thing that's like so universal, you know? And it really connects so well. And it connected when I saw it, and I felt that so much. I haven't seen you. Well, I did see you solo. I saw you last year solo when we did that thing at Oxbow.
Oxbow, yeah.
Yeah, that was amazing because it was like you on this like lakeside porch with this like very tender and sweet audience just kind of just like looking up at you, and the sun was right behind you. I remember, and I feel like you played, there was like 2 songs I think you played that I remember listening to from this record specifically. I think I could be wrong, but it sounded like it.
Yeah. No, definitely.
And it was just so, that was like really just like very like intimate and very beautiful.
Yeah, that was a really beautiful weekend, and got to dance to your set. Got to bring I brought my kid solo to that set, and I kind of just handed her off to someone.
Well, I think I have a photo of her the next day, like sleeping on the floor in the grass.
Yeah.
But to answer your question about personas, I think that when I go on stage and perform, that is a completely different person than who I am on a day-to-day. I save that energy for the stage, I think, a lot. I'm not trying to take up a lot of space or like be a vacuum in other spaces and take up other people's space. But when I'm like on stage, I'm like, this is my stage. This is my song, you know? And like, I can't wait for you to like, just like have a good time with me.
Yeah. It took me a really long time to get comfortable with my solo performance. Like I think when I started Finom with Macy, which was like Ohm back then, I felt so relieved to finally have like a project where it felt like a certain side of myself would be presented at all times. And I felt like that told me like, okay, well, you're in Finom, and this is kind of the ethos of Finom. And so when you're on stage with that, then you just like fall into that, and your personhood can just kind of get blended into that in a way that I think made me feel really relaxed, and still does make me feel really relaxed when I'm on stage in Finom. I feel like I can kind of get a little lost in a really good way, in a way that makes it feel really fun and playful. And for a long time with my solo stuff, I wasn't sure about how to present it because it just was so direct, and so it felt so earnest. It felt so like very much just me, honestly. And that felt a little weird and strange to put in front of people on stage, such a unadulterated version of myself. But I think now I feel very grateful to have this record coming out in the age that I am, the era of life that I am in, because I feel like this kind of ultra confidence come into myself with it. It just suddenly feels like it's all like lining up within me, and like I'm very ready to like have this record be out and have myself like feel kind of just unconcerned about the fact that it's exactly what I want to say right out there.
Yeah. I'm just like going onto your Instagram right now. I didn't realize what you said here, 10 years in the making, and kind of having this like new side of you not exposed, but just sharing this in so many words, like this new vulnerability of like a side of you that wasn't expressed through like other projects like Finom. What does it mean, like 10 years in the making?
All of these songs that are on this record, they all mean so much to me, and I feel so precious about them in some ways. Like they sort of feel like the songs that came like so deeply from my heart that I think I felt kind of like I had to figure out the perfect way to present them. Like, I don't know. It was like a lot of like recording and re-recording over the span of like 10 years. Like Adonai, the last song on the record, that's like about my friend Chris who passed away. I wrote that song a couple years after he passed, but then like I just kind of didn't know what the right way to capture it was. And so I've always, like with this music, I've always waffled of like, should I just do it totally like guitar or like solo piano and just let the song be the song and not worry at all about how it gets performed or like what the arrangement is. But I think ultimately it was like different for each song. And I had to like work through that over the course of 10 years, plus a lot of other life was happening, and plus Finom was happening. And I was feeling so excited to really focus all my energy into Finom. So that's, you know, that and a lot of other things kind of like caused it to just kind of get backburnered. And then I think also one thing that I struggled with was, how do I want to capture my voice for these songs? I think vocal recording, people don't realize that it's like one of the hardest things. I find that when I'm recording my own vocals or other people's vocals, it is the most vulnerable thing to capture. And sometimes, you know, even just in the recording process of people hearing their own voice, they change their own voice. So it can be really tricky. So anyway, long story short, it took me a while to figure out how to sing my own songs. And I guess I was just like very much wanted to be, was a little bit of a perfectionist about it in some ways. So we finally got there. But I will say, it's like now when I listen to it, I'm like, oh, thank God, this is how I wanted this. This is how I wanted all of these songs to be presented. And yeah, 10 years is maybe a little, you know, was a little bit of a ridiculously long time, but that's fine. Hopefully people will listen to it for 100 years. I'm not sweating a matter of 1 or 2 years anymore.
No, and I think that's like a really good thing to share. I'll record and like noodle on keys and synths, and like I'll do sounds all day, you know. And then when you have to sit down and record your voice, you're like, oh my God, it's so stressful. I don't think people realize when you do your demo, you hit record and then you sing all this stuff, and there's probably like 50% of what you've sang is like, you're like, yeah, that's it. And then there's like another 50% you're just like, damn, now I have to write more words. And then you kind of totally recorded it in a way that's like with the worst mic in the world and the loudest room in the world, you know? And it's like the best vocal take you could ever have for that song. You know, you're so married to it.
Yeah.
And then you go back and then you're trying to emulate that feeling. And I think the thing that I've learned about vocal recording in music, in our songs that we make and write, is that I think exactly what you said, people go back and listen and change their voice. And I think people don't realize that like when you're like recording your voice, it's essentially synthesis. You're synthesizing your voice. You're like, sometimes you're going like word by word, kind of like shaping each word in such a specific way to kind of deliver this idea that you've created in your brain as like the perfect take that isn't even a take. It's literally just like the Lego blocks of your voice that you're just like stacking and making into some weird thing to share.
It's like a human thing to just connect to the voice. So I think it's kind of unavoidable that people fixate on it, because your voice is the face of your record in some ways.
For sure. And that's why you're like working on it so damn hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm glad you shared that, because I think it's crucial. There's a lot of songs, and I would probably never ever tell anyone which ones, but there's a lot of songs that I just like left the demo take in there, and I just spent maybe hours and hours cleaning it up as opposed to trying to just do it again. Yeah.
I'm also glad that you said that, because I've done that too before, where I'm like, oh, we captured this in this way. And if I could just like adjust this little thing or this little thing, then it will be joyful for me to listen back to. Like, you know, so often it's like, I will do like a first time demo take, and some, you know, people will listen and be like, oh, that's perfect. And I'm like, I'm glad that like I listened to that, because I know that maybe it captured like something in it that I can't hear. Like sometimes I can't always hear my own emotions back in my own voice, but other people can. But what I do hear back is like, you know, the little things that will drive me nuts. So I always feel like it has to be like a compromise between like your trusted listeners and yourself. I can roll through certain imperfections, but certain things I'm like, no, I care too much about this song to like let it not feel crispy.
Yeah. No, I hear you. So tell me, right now you're heading you're in Ireland. I saw that you have a show in Union Pool. And what's your plan for the rest of the year? What are you doing?
I'm heading back in like 2 days, and Finom has some shows in the fall. And then Finom is going on. We're touring Not God in October, November, like all over the East Coast, coming through Asheville. And so I'm really excited for that because playing the new Finom record feels so good. Like I'm really excited because I just like only want to play the new record. I feel like sometimes, I don't know, we've had like new songs or something and I'm like, okay, yeah, a couple of new songs, but I really want to play the old songs. But now I just like, I've really fallen in love with playing the record live front to back. So that feels really exciting. And then I'm doing a New York Sima show. We're going to play, I think, one show upstate. And then I have like a big Chicago album release show in December. So that's kind of it for Sima now. I would love to do some touring on the Sima record, but I'm not sure what it's going to look like yet. Like I sort of have this idea of like, can I like play in piano halls or like, you know, I kind of like, I want to do like a saloon or lounge tour with it where I can really just lean into the songwriter-y element of it. I don't really feel like I want to do like a indie rock tour with it. I'm excited about having a record where I can like play to people sitting down.
Yeah. Well, maybe describe it to people what you mean by indie rock tour.
Like, you know, you're driving and you pull up to a bar or club and they're awesome and you kind of like rock out in front of an audience, but there's like a lot of, I don't know. To be honest, sometimes there's like so much anxiety on tours like that, especially these days. Like, even if you have a really great record, it can be really hard to fill a room sometimes. And that like, sort of that like exhaustion of like, all right. So that's what I mean by an indie rock tour. There's like a certain like energy intensity that like comes with that kind of tour and those kinds of rooms. That like, if it's there, it's great. If it's not there, it's also okay sometimes. Like we've played some of our best shows to just a handful of people. But I think what I am like excited and craving for is kind of to like go win people over in like much smaller and more intimate settings with this record, like with the Sima record. Like not feel so much like I'm presenting a band as like I'm just presenting myself and I'm just here to share some thoughts I have on the world through my songs. It just feels really relaxed, the idea of it. Because if it's just me sharing songs, even if it's just to like 3 people, that feels like very, very like a really good exchange of energy still happened. And I don't know, that to me seems like a vacation tour.
That's awesome. Yeah. I feel like some of what I feel like I'm gathering too is like some of the anxiety that I get as well. And I'm sure you share the same, where it's just like these tours that we do, there's like so many things that are hinged on like selling tickets and aspects of like approval through like the people you work with, like agents or promoters, you know, and there's like this collaboration that you have between them. But then there's like levels of organization and excitement and disappointment, you know, where you're like, why things aren't going right or why things haven't, you know, are going well or, you know, so I think like what you're describing sounds like a dream tour. There's an artist my wife and I like really liked, Richard Buckner. And I remember, she was showing me, she was like, oh, they essentially, the way he does shows is he invites people to host him. And then there's like this whole like kind of like website describing like all the parameters of hosting a show of his at like your house or a space or something like that, you know? And people submit to host them. And I thought that's awesome, you know?
That's super awesome. Jen Wasner also did something like that, right? Didn't she do like a living room tour where like people hosted her? Yeah, I mean, I think something like that sounds like really beautiful. I definitely think I would love to do something like that with this record. I think part of like the indie rock playing club rooms anxiety is that you have to like, there's like people who go there to have this very specific experience. And like what I really have so often like dreamed about is like people actually who don't consider themselves like music listeners, or like, I'm not necessarily someone who like buys a ticket to go see a band once a week or once a month. I'm just someone who is like sitting here having a good time and would love it if someone like sang me a song and surprised them. If like I could do that and once in a while it really like hit home for someone somewhere when they weren't expecting, and it's one of my songs that I wrote, that to me is like the dream. I think that's what I mean by like when I put High Roller out, I sort of was like, I don't know what my expectations are with this record. I think I just feel so grateful that like these songs are out there, and I just want people to like sing along to them, or maybe feel like they kind of suddenly carry around this song that they know really well with them. I guess maybe that's what people always hope with their records, but I feel that really strongly with this record, and I guess it makes me sort of think about, try and think a little outside of the box and maybe go uncover some interesting watering holes.
I love that, and I think you deserve it. And I know with some of these songs, I feel like they're easy to get stuck in your brain, and who wouldn't want to sing them with you? Or at least sing them in their shower, thinking about your song.
That's all I want. I want some shower singers. I want, who knows, like karaoke. Like, how do you, like, wouldn't that be so cool if someone karaoke'd my song? That's a goal.
I think that would be a really good touring idea, like a karaoke tour that goes to different clubs that people can go sing. So, I don't know. There's probably something like that. Maybe this is a terrible idea. Somebody's like, dude, I tried it. Don't do it.
I think that would be really cool with like a bunch of my friends' bands. Make our own little like karaoke circuit. I think it's worth it.
A karaoke festival. That could just be horrible and amazing at the same time. So just throwing that out there.
It was so good to see you and talk to you.
You too. Yeah, this is wonderful. I'm so happy we got to do this.
Thanks for listening to the Talkhouse Podcast, and thanks to Sima Cunningham and Roberto Lange for chatting. If you liked what you heard, please follow Talkhouse on your favorite podcasting platform, and be sure to check out all the great stuff at talkhouse.com. This episode was produced by Myron Kaplan, and the Talkhouse theme is composed and performed by The Range. See you next time.